Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Kirill speaking, and you definitely don't want to miss the story I'm about to share. If you're stopping by for the first time, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. Trust me when I say this tale is not just another ghost story. It's something that happened in a small American town called Greenfield, and it changed one man's life forever. Michael and Olivia were a married couple living in a modest apartment near the outskirts of Greenfield. This town wasn't exactly famous, mostly a quiet place with a single movie theater, a local grocery store that closed early on Sundays, and rows of old houses that had been passed down through generations. People like to say that once you moved here, you either settled down for good or left at the first chance for something bigger. Michael drove a city bus for a living, ferrying locals and college students between neighborhoods. Olivia greeted clients at a hair salon on Main Street, where everyone gossiped about each other's families and the local high school football team. Their apartment building had been erected in the 1950s and never saw a full renovation. The walls in the hallway were a faded pastel blue, chipped in corners, and the flickering overhead lights made everything look more worn than it actually was. But Michael and Olivia didn't complain. They had a small living room stuffed with secondhand furniture, a cramped kitchen with squeaky cabinets, and a tiny bedroom where they shared laughter and late-night whispers. They often joked about how someday they'd move to a more modern condo, but finances were tight, and they were content to make do with what they had. The day Olivia disappeared started off normally. She left for work wearing a light denim jacket, telling Michael she might stop by the grocery store to pick up fresh vegetables for dinner. He smiled at her from the couch, reminding her to call if she needed anything. But that evening, the apartment felt unnaturally empty when Michael returned. His wife was nowhere in sight. At first, he assumed her shift had run late. Minutes turned into hours, and her cell phone rang without an answer. Fear nodded his thoughts. He called her coworkers, but they'd last seen her leaving the salon at the usual time. He checked the parking lot, only to find his own car. Frantic, he woke several neighbors who offered to help. By midnight, he was on the phone with the police, filing a missing persons report. The hours until dawn felt like an eternity, with Michael pacing the apartment, every shadow seeming to hold some terrible secret. Greenfield's police force wasn't large, but the officers did what they could. They asked him about Olivia's state of mind, their marriage, her friends, anyone who might have a motive to harm her. Michael, distraught, could barely think of a single person who disliked her. She was warm, outgoing, had a habit of feeding the stray cats around the alley behind their building. No, it made no sense for her to vanish. Days passed in a blur of sleepless nights, reprinted flyers, and dozens of phone calls. Michael tried to keep hope alive, but a gnawing sense of dread told him something was terribly wrong. Neighbors started checking in on him regularly with casseroles and offers to help search. Deep down, he realized that the odds were turning grim. Finally, on the fourth day, a patrol officer knocked on his door. The man's expression spoke volumes. "We found a woman's body near the edge of Pinewood Forest, just off the highway. The description matches your wife," he said gently. Michael felt his world tilt on its axis. He followed the officer to the coroner's office, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Michael confirmed his worst nightmare. It was Olivia, bruised and battered, her life stolen by violent means. The final autopsy report would take time, but nobody doubted it was homicide. In the days that followed, Michael went through the motions of arranging her funeral. Friends and family attended, offering condolences that washed over him like static. He stood by her casket, numb and silent, as if part of him had been buried along with her. After the funeral, he found himself alone in their apartment. The emptiness was crushing. Mugs that still bore traces of her favorite tea, her half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, each detail tore at him. Time blurred. He couldn't bring himself to return to work. Instead, he spent his days staring vacantly at the walls, occasionally flipping through photo albums or scrolling through her social media page, searching for any sign of what had gone so wrong. Nights were worse. Sleep came in fragmented bursts, punctuated by vivid dreams where Olivia was still alive, waiting for him in the hallway or humming in the kitchen. He'd wake up trembling, heart hammering, only to remember that reality was far more cruel. A month slipped by in this agonizing limbo. Even his friends didn't know how to reach him. He avoided phone calls, rarely ate, barely went outside. But then came the call. Late one evening, the phone buzzed. Michael almost ignored it, assuming it was another well-meaning acquaintance checking up on him, or a telemarketer. But curiosity got the best of him, and he pressed accept. A woman's low voice filtered through the line, saying words that sent chills through him. "I can help you bring Olivia back." He froze, his thoughts suddenly racing. Before he could speak, the call disconnected, leaving him holding the silent phone to his ear. At first, he assumed it had to be some wretched prank. Yet a tiny spark of hope flared. Who would say something like that? Why pick him? Could it possibly be true? Michael's rational mind told him it was absurd. Olivia was dead, cruelly taken. But at night, his grief made any possibility, no matter how wild, worth considering. He had no idea that this mysterious phone call was about to yank him out of his despondency and plunge him into something far stranger. Soon, Michael would be forced to question the very boundaries between life and death, and find himself chasing the impossible across Greenfield's quiet streets and lonely roads. In the days that followed, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, wanted him to pick up that phone, to believe in the impossible. His rational mind fought against it, but the voice of longing in his heart kept whispering, "What if there's a chance?" Little did he know that this faint glimmer of hope would soon lead him down a path where the line between what is real and what is supernatural would blur in ways he never imagined possible. Michael's exhaustion had grown relentless. Ever since receiving that cryptic phone message, he found himself jumping at the smallest noises, half expecting his phone to ring again with the same mysterious voice on the other end. He wasn't sure if he was actually craving another call or dreading it. Maybe a bit of both. Late one evening, as he was standing in his kitchen trying to force down a cup of instant coffee, his phone finally buzzed. The same unknown number lit up the screen. His pulse quickened. With trembling fingers, he answered. "Hello." A deep, slightly raspy female voice responded, "Good evening, Michael. My name is Tatiana. I'm the one who contacted you before." He gripped the phone, unable to form a coherent response. "Don't hang up," Tatiana said quietly. "What I have to tell you is unusual, but I promise I'm not playing a joke on you. This might be your only chance to reunite with your wife." Michael pressed the phone tighter to his ear. He was torn between slamming it down or clinging to every word. "Your wife's spirit hasn't fully left this world," Tatiana continued. "In rare cases, a soul can take refuge in an earthly creature, especially when the person died violently and left something unfinished behind. I believe Olivia's soul found refuge in a cat." If anyone else had said this, Michael would have dismissed it as madness. But after a month of living in a nightmare, he was prepared to believe almost anything. How could that possibly be real? "Meet me tomorrow evening," she said. "I'll text you the address." He tried to press for details, but the line went dead. No callback number, no real explanation. For a solid minute, he stood there, phone still in hand, mind whirling. Was this some cruel hoax or a legitimate lead? Even the idea of seeing Olivia in the form of a cat sounded insane. But then again, homicide and heartbreak had already thrown him into a world he barely recognized. Unable to sleep, Michael spent the night online, searching for any information that might fit Tatiana's wild claims. Most of what he found seemed like folklore and superstition, websites about spirits refusing to leave the earthly plane, ghost stories about animals that carried the souls of the departed. Yet in his desperation, he clung to every thread of possibility, no matter how thin. The next day, he waited anxiously by his phone. Late in the afternoon, a text arrived with an address on the far outskirts of Greenfield. It was a dilapidated old motel, long since abandoned after the new highway diverted passing traffic elsewhere. Some said it was haunted, others joked that it was a gathering spot for oddballs. Now Michael would see for himself. When he arrived that evening, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky a mix of orange and purple. The building looked even spookier up close, windows boarded up, rusted signs creaking in the wind. He tried one of the side entrances and found it unlocked, stepping into a dim hallway with peeling wallpaper. A single flickering light cast shadows that seemed to stretch and shift. "Over here," a woman's voice called from around a corner. Her tone was calm, yet carried a certain weight. Michael approached cautiously and found a slender, dark-haired woman in a worn leather jacket. She held a small bag in one hand. "Tatiana." She nodded. "You're right on time. I know this must all feel bizarre, but trust me, I've seen things that defy logic. I'm not here to exploit your grief. I only want to help you find your wife's spirit." Even as disbelief coursed through him, Michael sensed a sincerity in her voice that made him hesitate. "Then tell me, how?" Tatiana opened the bag and pulled out an old ceramic bowl with intricate symbols etched around its rim. "I'm going to give you this," she said. "If Olivia truly inhabits a cat's body, you can perform a simple test. Fill this bowl with milk. If she drinks it completely and the milk clouds over after she's done, it means her spirit has found a new vessel. But be warned, do not share this secret with anyone, or you could jeopardize her soul's safety. Michael stared at the bowl in his hands, pulse hammering. Was he really going to do this? Before he could ask more, Tatiana tucked the bag under her arm. Don't look for me here again, she said. I'll contact you when the time is right. She turned to leave, pausing only briefly to add, remember, secrets have power. Stay quiet if you want to protect her. Then she was gone, disappearing into the motel's dark corridors. Michael was left alone, clutching the strange bowl, his mind racing with questions. Driving home, he kept checking the rearview mirror, half convinced he was being followed. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that someone, or something, wanted to keep him from discovering the truth. Back at his apartment, he set the bowl on the kitchen table. It looked ancient, as though it belonged in a museum of oddities. The swirling symbols on its rim made him think of cryptic runes or some forgotten language. He felt foolish even considering the instructions, but at the same time, he couldn't let go of the hope that somehow, Olivia was still close by. Exhausted, he eventually fell into a restless sleep, unsure of what the next day would bring. He slept fitfully, imagining he heard phantom meows echoing in the hallway. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Olivia's face, her smile tinged with sadness, as if urging him not to give up. Part of him still thought this was all madness, but another part couldn't ignore the voice on the phone. No one else had offered a single clue about what might have happened to her spirit, if such a thing even existed. By morning, he felt compelled to do something, anything. That day, he bought a small carton of milk from the local convenience store and placed the bowl on his kitchen floor. The hush of the apartment broken only by the hum of the fridge. He realized how absurd it seemed, waiting for a cat to appear out of thin air, but desperation drove him forward. He cracked the door open, hoping some stray feline might wander and if fate willed it. Hours passed. Nothing. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about Tatiana's warning to keep things quiet. What if people found out he was trying to commune with his deceased wife's spirit? They'd call him deranged, or worse. He decided to keep this bizarre quest to himself, at least for now, and see if the next phone call would reveal more. Little did he know, forces he couldn't fully comprehend were already stirring, ready to test the fragile boundaries between life and death, and place him on a collision course with the unknown. Michael spent the next few days wrestling with his own skepticism and a growing spark of hope. He still had the ceramic bowl on his kitchen counter, and he couldn't go more than a few hours without glancing at it, wondering if he had truly lost his mind. Was it possible that Olivia's spirit really dwelled in a cat's body somewhere out there in Greenfield? Despite the strangeness of the whole situation, he felt compelled to start searching the streets. Early in the morning, he'd place the bowl in his backpack, hop into his aging sedan, and drive around town, stopping anywhere he spotted stray cats, behind the dumpster near the local diner, around the vacant lot next to the old library, and in the alleys near the park. Whenever he saw one, he'd carefully approach, set the bowl down with some milk, and wait anxiously. Every time, the result was the same. The cat would either bolt away or casually drink before wandering off. None of them caused the milk to cloud over, and Michael's initial excitement gradually eroded. Yet he refused to give up. If Tatiana was right, this bizarre ritual was his only chance of reconnecting with Olivia. He started missing work more often, ignoring calls from his shift manager. Friends noticed him prowling around town, leaving out bowls of milk like some forlorn stray feeder. People whispered that grief had unhinged him. But Michael couldn't bear to explain the real reason, certain they'd label him insane. Then, on the fifth night of his search, he saw a black cat staring at him outside his apartment building. Heart pounding, he stepped out of his car, gently placed the bowl of milk on the sidewalk, and waited. For an instant, he thought the cat's eyes flashed with recognition. But it dashed off, leaving him standing in the cold darkness, the bowl untouched. Sleepless and frustrated, Michael resolved to find Tatiana again. Yet she'd never given him a phone number, just that abandoned motel address. He went back there after sunset, only to find it sealed shut with heavy chains on the doors. Circling around the property for nearly an hour, he saw no trace of the enigmatic woman. A sense of doom weighed on him. His one lead seemed to have vanished. Shortly after, he began noticing a black SUV in his rearview mirror. It appeared at odd times, staying several cars behind, disappearing whenever he tried to confirm it was following him. At first, he told himself it was paranoia. But the sightings continued, fueling his suspicion that someone was tracking his movements. Meanwhile, strange incidents plagued his home. Twice, he found his apartment door unlocked when he was positive he'd locked it. Nothing seemed stolen, But on his kitchen table, he discovered a single playing card left behind, the Queen of Spades. He couldn't fathom what it meant. Was it a threat? A warning? One afternoon, desperate for some clue, he visited a small occult store called Mystic Echo in downtown Greenfield. The place smelled of incense and old books. A tall, silver-haired woman at the counter introduced herself as Daria. When Michael cautiously mentioned he'd heard of souls attached to animals, she listened with calm empathy. "I've come across similar tales," Daria said softly. "They usually involve a violent death and a strong bond that keeps the soul tethered here. If your wife was killed, her spirit may still roam this world, seeking closure." Michael felt tears burn at the corners of his eyes. "Is there a way to prove it?" Daria's gaze held a hint of sympathy. "Yes, but it can open doors you might not be ready to face. If you're certain you want to try, come back tonight after closing. I'll see what I can do." Michael left the shop with a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation swirling inside him. Part of him feared he was diving headfirst into a dangerous unknown. Another part, though, believed this might be the only path to the truth. In the days leading up to his planned meeting with Daria, Michael ramped up his efforts to spot any cat that could be Olivia. He left bowls of milk in alleys, behind the gas station, and near the deserted school playground. Yet no cat ever stayed long enough to finish the milk, let alone cause it to become cloudy. His neighbors grew more curious and concerned, but he avoided lengthy explanations. Now and then, he considered telling the police about the black SUV or the unsettling break-ins, but he doubted they'd take him seriously without solid evidence. The investigation into Olivia's murder seemed frozen in place. Michael suspected that if her spirit truly lingered, it was because she couldn't rest until the truth was exposed. By the time he arrived at Mystic Echo for his after-hours appointment, his nerves were frayed. A sign on the door read "Closed," but a dim glow inside beckoned him. Daria unlocked the door and ushered him to a small table draped with a cloth embroidered with moons and stars. "Sit," she said gently. She lit a bundle of sage, let the smoke drift around him, and placed a candle before him. Soft chanting left her lips, words he couldn't fully grasp. Yet the atmosphere vibrated with energy, making his pulse throb. A dizziness swept over him. He caught sight of a fleeting silhouette in his peripheral vision. Daria sucked in a breath. "She's here," she whispered. "Your wife's spirit is searching for resolution, but there's interference. Something or someone doesn't want her to reach you." Michael's gut twisted. He remembered the black SUV, the Queen of Spades, the locked doors suddenly found open. "What can I do?" Daria's voice trembled with urgency. "Stay watchful. If your wife truly inhabits a cat, she may be trying to find you, but forces are working against her. You must keep going, no matter how insane it seems. Trust very few, and never underestimate those who want to bury the truth." Later that night, Michael drove home feeling both energized and terrified. Something sinister lurked in the background of Olivia's death, and if her soul had indeed taken refuge in a feline form, she must have had a powerful reason. He couldn't stop now. Even if it meant risking his own safety, he owed it to Olivia to discover what truly happened and to help her find peace in whatever life might come next. Before he drifted off to a restless sleep, Michael found himself staring at Olivia's old photo on the bedside table. He recalled how she'd laugh at silly cat videos, how she once insisted they adopt a stray. She had such a kind heart. Now, if her spirit still roamed the streets, he was determined to guide her home, or at least uncover the secret that refused to let her go. Deep down, he sensed that each step brought him closer to the truth and further into danger. Tension built steadily over the next several days. Michael found himself caught in a storm of conflicting emotions, dread over being watched, hope that he might soon find Olivia's spirit, and anger at the possibility that someone was trying to cover up her murder. The sense of a hidden conspiracy gnawed at him. He felt it whenever he glimpsed that dark SUV tailing him from a distance, or discovered yet another cryptic sign that someone had been in his apartment. Despite his fear, Michael pressed forward. He started talking to old acquaintances of Olivia's, including a co-worker who revealed that Olivia had been receiving strange notes shortly before her death, anonymous messages warning her to stay out of other people's affairs. Michael's heart lurched at this revelation. Had Olivia stumbled upon something dangerous? Was that what led to her murder? Desperate for clarity, he visited Daria at Mystic Echo again. She prepared a scrying bowl ritual, where flickering candlelight reflected off dark water. Her expression was grave as she gazed into the shimmering surface. In a trembling voice, she told Michael she sensed a powerful negativity swirling around Olivia's final days, something about a betrayal, a threat, and unspoken secrets that might have driven her to confront the wrong people. Michael listened with bated breath, each new hint twisting his insides. His wife had always been empathetic and fearless. If she uncovered a wrongdoing, she wouldn't hesitate to stand up for what was right. But that courage might have led her straight into mortal danger. After the ritual ended, Daria handed Michael a small charm, saying it could offer some spiritual protection against malevolent forces. He was skeptical but accepted it, too unsettled to refuse any potential help. That evening, he received a phone call from an unknown number. Once again, Tatiana. "I sense you're close to something," she whispered. "Have you found the cat yet?" Michael admitted he hadn't. "But I've learned that Olivia might have been threatened." "Did you know she was murdered because of something she discovered?" Tatiana's silence stretched. Then she said, "I only saw fragments, shadows of the truth." "She won't rest until you uncover it all. Keep searching for her new form. She's trying to guide you. And be careful. There are those who fear what she knows, even after death." With that, she hung up. Michael cursed under his breath, exhaustion and frustration mingling in his veins. The cryptic advice offered no real direction. Yet it further convinced him that the unknown watchers were part of a dangerous network linked to Olivia's demise. In the coming days, he pieced together more details. A neighbor recalled seeing a suspicious figure lurking near their mailbox, while a co-worker at the bus depot mentioned that Olivia had once confided something about important evidence. None of it painted a full picture, but Michael felt the puzzle edges snapping into place, forming the outline of a grim truth. One night, as he lay awake on his couch, his cell phone rang. The call lasted only a few seconds, enough for him to hear distant static and a noise resembling a cat's faint meow before the line went dead. His heart hammered. Was it Olivia, trying to reach him? Or was it another twisted ploy by whoever was following his every move? Determined to press on, he doubled his efforts to find the cat. He searched parking lots after closing hours, combed the local park at dawn, and posted anonymous online ads asking if anyone had seen a notably affectionate stray. But each lead turned cold. All the while, the sense of being hunted never left him. Late one evening, while staking out a row of dumpsters behind a shuttered restaurant, Michael noticed headlights approaching slowly. Panicking, he hid behind a trash bin. Sure enough, a black SUV crawled past, its driver scanning the alleyway. Michael held his breath until it disappeared around the corner, heart pounding like a drum. He realized he couldn't keep living like this, skulking through back streets, terrified of an unknown enemy. The thought of giving up briefly crossed his mind, but then he pictured Olivia's face, remembered how her laughter once filled their home. No, he couldn't abandon her. If she was out there in any form, he had to see this through, no matter the cost. That night, as he tried to catch a few hours of sleep, he was jolted awake by a thunderous pounding on his door. Opening it cautiously, he found an envelope scrawled with a single word: "Stop." Inside was a photo of him crouching over a milk bowl near an alley, his face clearly visible under a streetlight. The message was clear: if he continued digging, there would be consequences. Fear roiled in his gut, but so did a surge of defiance. Whoever was behind Olivia's murder and these threats didn't want the truth coming out. Maybe they even realized that Olivia's spirit wasn't at rest. Michael locked his door and sank onto the couch, the ultimatum echoing in his mind. Should he heed the warning or fight back harder than ever? Torn between caution and determination, he decided to confront Daria once more. The next day, he walked into Mystic Echo carrying the threatening envelope. She scanned the photo, her face tightening. "There are forces at play here that go beyond mere coincidence," she said grimly. "If someone left this on your doorstep, they're telling you that they see everything you do. But they also underestimate the power of a soul driven by love." Michael glanced at the charm she'd given him, now looped around his keychain. "This hasn't exactly kept danger away," he muttered. Daria pursed her lips. "Protection charms aren't force fields. They can only shield you from certain energies. Physical threats still exist. But this does tell me one thing. Your wife's spirit is indeed stirring up something they want buried." Despair flickered across his eyes. "I still haven't found the cat. What if Olivia gave up trying to reach me?" Daria placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Souls that linger after violent ends rarely give up. If she's out there, she's bound to appear at a moment that matters most. You just have to stay ready." With renewed resolve, Michael left, ignoring the prickling sense that he was being watched. The night that followed brought a new development, another call from Tatiana. Her tone was urgent, almost frantic. "They're closing in. The more you search, the more desperate they become. Listen carefully. If Olivia's soul isn't a cat, she'll be drawn to something familiar. An object, a place, or you." He wanted to scream at her for more details, but she hung up before he could utter a word. Anger jolted through him, yet he recalled what Darius said. Sometimes a soul returns because it yearns for justice. If that justice involved unmasking a conspiracy, it was no wonder the conspirators were panicking. Michael's determination never wavered, even as his life turned into a twisted game of cat and mouse. Everywhere he went, he sensed people watching him, trailing his car, lurking just out of sight. Yet he pressed on, fueled by a need for closure, both for himself and, he believed, for Olivia's restless spirit. One early morning, as he paced his living room, the phone rang from an unknown number. His stomach flipped. He hadn't heard from Tatiana in days. Bracing himself for another riddle, he was startled to hear her trembling voice say, "Michael, I think I found her, Olivia." She directed him to a condemned house on the west side of Greenfield, near the old sawmill. Racing across town, he arrived at the sagging structure and found Tatiana in the weed-choked yard. Inside, amid musty shadows and broken beams, a small gray cat with wide, bright eyes watched him intently. Tatiana told him to use the bowl. With shaking hands, Michael poured milk into the ceramic dish. The cat drank it all, and the liquid turned cloudy. Overcome with emotion, he gazed into the cat's eyes and felt a spark of recognition. Olivia was there. Suddenly, the front door crashed open. Two men in dark clothing stormed in, one wielding a gun. "We warned you," he snarled. "Drop this, or you'll join her fate." Michael shielded the cat, adrenaline spiking. Tatiana let out a cry. A shot rang out, splintering the floor as Michael lunged, wrestling for control of the weapon. Sirens blared outside. Police burst in, subduing the intruders. In the chaotic aftermath, Michael recognized one of the officers from the early days of Olivia's missing person case. At last, the conspiracy that took her life was exposed. She had stumbled upon a powerful network running illegal finances, refusing to keep silent. Her murderers had tried to erase every trace of the truth, even beyond death. In the following weeks, Michael adopted the gray cat, naming her Liv in tribute to Olivia. Though he sensed that Olivia's spirit gradually found peace, he treasured the time they had, convinced that love had bridged an impossible divide. As for Tatiana, she slipped away into the shadows, leaving only a cryptic voicemail. "She's free now. Take care." Greenfield buzzed with news of the arrests, the scandal unraveling at high levels. Reporters hounded Michael for sensational interviews, but he declined. He preferred to remember Olivia as she was brave, compassionate, and determined to stand for what was right. Eventually, life settled into a calmer routine. Michael moved to a quieter apartment, keeping Liv's little collar on a shelf beside photos of Olivia. Sometimes, he'd swear he felt a warm, familiar presence drift through the room, as if Olivia was reminding him that true devotion transcends even death. And in those moments, he believed it wholeheartedly. Because he'd witnessed it himself. The day a cat's eyes reflected the soul of the woman he loved, drawing him into one last battle for justice that even death could not prevent.